This is the Everton Byline, episode 50. Can you believe we have made it all the way to a landmark-ish number? I am Matt Jones. Joining me as ever is Paddy Boylan. Paddy, how do you feel about that?
Well, it's not actually our 50th show, is it? Because we did.
No.
I'm just trying to think. We did at least one special on Dyche leaving for starters.
We did a takeover one as well.
It is podcast episode number 50, which is nice. Half century, if we're using a cricketing term, and yeah, nice. I mean, I've really enjoyed doing them all, and we continue to get lovely feedback, don't we, from people via the email account and on social media. So we'll thank everyone for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks to everybody who has to listen to all those episodes as we continue to go on. And obviously the podcast is sort of growing a little bit in the space of what is just under a year now. So really appreciate the feedback. Do keep it coming as well, as it helps get the podcast in front of as many people as possible. But yeah, we are here to talk about all things Everton. It's been a relatively quiet week, I think, in the grand scheme of things, but still a few big talking points to get into. Before we do that, just some housekeeping first. As ever, just a reminder, we are sponsored by the Bridewell. I mentioned at the weekend, last Friday even, I went down to the Denby, which is the sister pub, to have an afternoon with Derek Manfield and me dad. Not just me, Derek Manfield and me dad. Quite a lot of other people as well, but we were three of the people there. It was great, and I would recommend it to anybody who is involved in those, who gets the chance really to go to one of those former players' afternoons to go and do it. It's, fantastic. Around 60, 70 people there. Derek was great with his time. So yeah, well worth your time if you're ever thinking about doing it. So do keep an eye out on the Bridewell site and on the Denbys as well for all things going on with that over the course of the next few weeks. They've got a lot planned over the course of the summer. If you're watching us on YouTube, do leave us a rating. If you're watching on YouTube, do leave a comment. Do hit subscribe and do hit like. If you are listening to us on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere else, do leave us a rating and do leave us a review. And just before we get into it, Paddy, today, we had a really nice comment from somebody, feedback from somebody called James, who just wanted to bring up, he's at the police 1500 on YouTube. Really nice message, talking about how he listens in the car and how much he really enjoys the show. So just wanted to give a shout out to James for that really kind message. And I hope you've enjoyed the podcast, mate. I hope you're enjoying. I hope you will enjoy today's one as well. If you want to get in touch with us as well, as a lot of people did last week, and we had some people send it over. Theme tunes, Paddy, we've got a few in the pipeline that we're looking to try and get sorted out. So yeah, hopefully it won't be too long before we get one of those boxed up. But really appreciate everyone sending them in. Very kind with people's time and amazing the effort that goes into it from a lot of people. So really appreciate that as well. If you want to get in touch with us, it is evertonbyline@gmail.com. And yeah, it's not long, Paddy, as we record this on Monday afternoon. Everton about to kick off their pre-season tour in around 24 hours-ish. Tour of the Northwest first, and then it's off to the United States. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But in the meantime, we have signed a centre forward in the shape of the 6'5" Thierno Barry. He's rocked up from Villarreal for £27.5 million initially. When I spoke to Phil Kitchemilides last week, I'm sure people who are regulars on the Blue Room would have heard that. He suggested that Villarreal were quite happy to get that kind of fee for Barry, but I also feel like he's a player that everybody's rightly very excited about when it comes to Everton. So, it feels like one of those which could work for everyone, but obviously now it's done, it's boxed off. You did your long read piece on The Athletic last week, sort of about how this deal came about and what he could offer to the team. How do you feel about it now it's all boxed off and done and dusted?
Yeah, well, it's nice to see Everton get that second name through the door. I know a lot of fans have been waiting for that quite and not anxiously as such, but waiting for it to happen. And now it is over the line, as you say. I do think it works well for everyone because I don't think anybody was going to hit the release clause, the €40 million release clause this summer. So there needed to be some element of negotiation. It's close enough. The final fee is close enough to that. I think it's €32 million initially, with about 6 in bonuses if every clause is hit. It's close enough to the release clause that Villarreal can see that as a win, particularly after they spent about €15 million on him last summer. So huge profit for them. Continues their trend of signing relatively young, unproven strikers and turning them into the players that Premier League clubs want. I mean, think of Nicholas Jackson, who Everton actually showed a pretty keen interest in as well prior to his move to Chelsea that same summer. Sorloth, different end of the spectrum, but they've done something similar with him. So they will see it as a win to get pretty close to the release clause. Everton have managed to negotiate them down a little bit after, let's be honest, weeks of haggling, more or less. They've been there for a while. I think we've all known it's been there for a while. And we got to this, as I pointed out in the long week, we got to this really bizarre point in the negotiations where some people were telling us this was all agreed, particularly on the Spanish side. This is all agreed, it's going to happen. And then people closer to home, certainly close to home for us, were telling us that, yeah, it is close and it is progressing and we expect it to go through. But it's not all there. And I don't think anything massively changed in terms of numbers. Those numbers didn't really shift that much week to week. I think it was more just like when this was paid and how it was paid and all the kind of the nitty gritty of the instalment side. So yeah, they've got it over the line. Everton will see it as a win. Player moves to the Premier League, which is, if we're being honest, where most players want to be right now. I don't know if you saw his comments. He was talking about watching Lukaku playing for Everton. He's at least the second striker that's come to the club, if we include Betto as well, who's referenced Lukaku as somebody to look to from Everton's recent past. And I suppose that's the model, isn't it? Young striker, hungry striker comes to the club. They're looking to develop and prove themselves. And if we're being honest, there's an element of potential resale further down the line if they do manage to hit the height. So yeah, pleased to see that one through the door. I actually don't think it was the biggest priority, and I'm sure the listeners will be sick of hearing me bang on about the right wing, so I'm not going to do it much more. I think there are other bigger priorities, but I think Everton saw an opportunity here to get in what was a top target on terms they wanted, to get that over the line and make a bit of a statement early on in the window. They've done that, but they obviously can't rest on their laurels because there's much, much more to do this window.
Just, I'm interested to know, I'd love to know behind the scenes sort of when the interest in this lad sort of started and when it sparked, because obviously we've spoken loads about how there's been so much change behind the scenes, and obviously a lot of people have left the club in regards to the recruitment side, although a lot of that, a fair portion of that structure has been retained as well. But do you feel like this is one of those that Everton would have looked at him kind of midway through last season and thought, there's a lad doing there who's only just come into La Liga, but all the tools are there for him to potentially go on and be a good player? Or do you get the sense that this was more driven by some of the newer faces that came into the football club and might have been more of a target that they kind of had on their radar before they came to Everton?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an element of both. You're right to point to the fact that below the former head of recruitment, Dan Paddy, the rest of that scouting structure is, as I understand it, completely intact. So you've still got the same scout looking at these players, grading them, reporting back to decision makers. A lot of the decision makers obviously have changed. But from what I'm told, Barry first came onto Everton's radar properly when he was at Basel in Switzerland. They'd had a look at him. It's pretty common now for just about every Premier League club, and I'd say most Championship clubs too, to have something that's almost automatic within their scouting apparatus, whereby they're logging the players who very early on in their careers are making decent numbers of appearances. So debuts and things like that. They know who's coming through the age group levels because they attend these kind of youth international tournaments too. So that the view at that point of Barry would have been really talented, one to monitor, but incredibly raw. Like he needs another step before he comes somewhere like the Premier League. Obviously what Villarreal have done is they've gone to Basel. They've paid a much lower fee than Everton will pay them this summer.
What did he cost Villarreal? Sorry, Paddy.
About 15 million euros.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, they've made significant profits within the space of 12 months. But what Everton were able to do last season is continue to track his development at a much higher level and see how he adapts to that step up. Now, for all intents and purposes, he's improved massively over the last 12 months. He was in a side that qualified for the Champions League, played pretty regularly, scored goals pretty regularly. It was 11, 12 goals in all competitions. They were tracking him at the start of last summer and last season, but that definitely escalated post-Christmas when it became apparent that they were going to be likely to be in the market for another striker. And I don't think he's the only name. I mean, I reported 2 at the start of the summer. He was obviously one of them. Nick Voltemade from Stuttgart and the German national team was another. There will have been conflicting views inside the club as to which direction to go in across the last 6 months. Because, as we've mentioned previously on this show, those 2 players are very different. So do you want something that is closer to Betto in Barry, where effectively you can have one play 60 minutes, grind the opposition down, and then you get exactly the same things tactically, stylistically for the final 30 or so? Or do you want a point of difference, which would have been, I think, Voltemade within Everton's team? They've decided to go to Barry, and the key decision makers are the ones that are in situ right now. So that's, if we're being honest, David Moyes, Nick Hammond did the deal, Angus Kinnear's around it, but wouldn't necessarily feed in on the technical side for the player. That would more be, what do we think of this as a fee, and so on and so forth. So that's why I say it's an element of kind of the old scouting regime meets the new, because they suggest the players, and then the new guys, particularly Moyes, are wading in and having to say about which ones to actually pursue. Like I say, they'll be really pleased to get that over the line. But I find it interesting they've gone for Barry over, let's say, for example, making a statement and signing a winger. I think that's about availability as much as anything else. And like, this guy's here right now. Let's not waste the opportunity because we want to pursue a right winger. Let's just get it done and then move on to the right wing.
I suppose in the recent past, they've not been in a position to do that, really, have they? To go and just spend £27.5 million without selling someone, would have been, a huge thing for us in regards to PSR and the financial strife they've been in. So from that standpoint, it obviously is encouraging, and, the change of ownership again, it can't be kind of understated. But I think it's going to be interesting now what kind of role he sort of takes up, Barry, going into the new season, because I think we'll see a bit of him in pre-season, where we think obviously for the first few weeks, maybe haven't been involved in the under-21s. We might have to wait maybe to the States before we get a proper look at him. But I think Moyes was quite interested in what he said about him when he came in regards to he's going to need a bit of time. And I think everything you read and hear about him suggests that while there is a lot of good aspects there, he is going to need time to kind of smooth down some of those rough edges in his game. But in the same breath, there's going to be a clamour for him to get games, isn't there? Because it's been a long time since Everton have spent that much money on a young player like that who's this exciting. And I think if we start the season and Betto maybe doesn't quite recapture that form, there's going to be a bit of pressure on him quickly to come in. But I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic that in the early weeks of the season, because Betto, we all know what he is and what he can do and what he can't do as a footballer, but he feels to me like the sort of personality that isn't necessarily going to be, dismayed or devastated by the fact that another striker is going to come in. I think he's going to really work hard to cling onto that shirt that he had to work hard to get in the first place. Yeah, well, he is the incumbent right now, if we're being honest. I mean, the season's starting just over a month, and the betting stakes right now, you'd probably have Betto leading the line for that match away at Leeds United. I think that Moyes' comments there, talking about a bit of patience. The other thing we will have to factor in that he's back on holiday again. Thierno Barry, he's in Mykonos in Greece this time. He's very active on Instagram, isn't he? He is. And I mean, I found it quite interesting in the research for the piece that, he'd been out in Miami
on his holidays before the move. He'd obviously been at the European Championship, the under-21s Championship with France earlier in the summer. So went on holiday after that. But even then, he was training with a professional coach out in Miami, training with Jack Harrison and training with Carlos Alcaraz, as well as Christian Pulisic. He was another one that was working with the same coach. So they were all kind of around it in Miami. Cut short his holiday to get the Everton move signed, sealed, and delivered, but then heads off again because he was due more time away following his participation in that under-21 Euros. So he will come back to Everton later, probably in time for the US tour at the end of the month. But that means he's playing catch up a little bit compared to Betto, and even maybe at first if Chermiti doesn't go on loan compared to Chermiti too. So I mean, that everything I've been told from the Everton side about Barry is that like they do really rate him. They had a look at his physical data and they thought that he was an elite physical profile. They think that next season he can contribute and he can compete with Betto for minutes, but they're not necessarily expecting him to be the one to shoulder all the burden all the time. There is an element here of, while he can contribute now, he's also going to be one for the future too, at 22 years of age. So I would kind of expect Betto to take on most of the onus for now, with Barry being phased in, unless there's an injury or unless something happens. And I think Betto relishes that. I think he likes being the main man, doesn't he? And we saw that in the second half of the season. My position on Betto is that I thought he showed that he can be a really adequate, serviceable Premier League striker, not necessarily a Champions League quality striker, but someone that certainly can do a job for Everton in this period of transition. So if they do go into the first game with him as a starter, I don't think anybody's going to be particularly disappointed. So let's see how it goes. We'll have to wait a while for a first glimpse of Thierno Barry. We might see him out in Chicago, Matt, on the pre-season tour. And for now, in the games to come, kind of in the week ahead against Accrington, Stanley, and then Blackburn Rovers, you'd imagine it's Betto and Chermiti kind of sharing those minutes and showing what they can do. I don't think that's a bad thing. It gives Chermiti another opportunity to stake a claim as well.
Yeah, get Thierno Barry on that boat cruise on Lake Michigan. Yeah. I think he'd have a great time. That's sort of like I was going to finish off my side of this by saying like watching him as a player and going on Instagram recently myself and trying to get used to it and following him and see what he's all about. Like he just looks like a fun fella, and I think that came across in his interview, didn't it, as well, when he's talking about the fans being crazy. And stuff. And I think while that's nice, I think it's important that we've kind of got that, because when you think about what we've had over the past few years, I think this is why everyone took to Njai so much last season. It was kind of like, God, it's so nice to have a footballer who's just dead fun and cool and can get you excited, because let's be honest, we're probably not going to be in a position where we're pushing for top 6 or top 8 again next year. It's going to be another season of development, and in a season like that where you kind of are mid-table and your balance kind of, it's a season where you're going to try and make progression up the table from being a team in the lower mid-table to the top half. You're going to need moments to kind of make you cling on to and keep you coming back. And I think having players who are fun and who are fun characters is important when you're in our situation. I remember feeling similar, and if he goes on anywhere near to be as important a player as Richarlison did for Everton, then he'll be a great signer for us. I remember thinking the same about him when he joined from Watford. He just looked like a very, very fun footballer. And I think if you're going to be mid-table, then I think those kind of characters and those kind of those kind of players are really important. So hopefully he's going to come to Goodison Park. Hope he's going to come to Hill Dixon Stadium and have a great time.
Maybe he will also go to Goodison Park and watch the women's team every second weekend or so.
I'm sure the new signings will want to go to Goodison, won't they? And just have a little look around and see what it's all about. Even if they obviously can't play there now.
Well, yeah, it's part of the club's history. I mean, going back to him being fun, I think he is fun. And we've certainly needed more of that over the last few years. And that's why imminent was so well received last season, because probably the first exciting player Everton have had for some time, in that kind of enforced period of austerity under kind of Mashiri right at the end. Barry should provide some more fun. I mean, he's an interesting character. They might have to rein him in on social media a little bit, because I mean, I've seen posts from him. When I started asking people in Spain about him, I saw posts from him where he was kind of responding to fans who were giving him stick, saying things like, well, if I score 6 between now and the end of the season, you need to deactivate your account and shut up, effectively.
I'm all for that. If anyone from Everton's listening who's in charge of players' social media, don't tell them to stop it, you know.
Well, it shows a bit of personality at the very least, but I mean, most Premier League clubs don't want that. We know that for a fact. He's also, and I think he did kind of rein this in a little bit at Villarreal, but certainly in his early days at Basel, he had a few red cards as well, didn't he? So Everton will want to avoid that. I mean, certainly something I don't think Moyes would be particularly forgiving with if that were to happen here. So I think patience. I'm glad Moyes mentioned that within the press release. I think there is going to have to be an element of patience. It's tough because it's still a very sizable fee, but they will expect him to contribute next season to some extent as well. I just think with Betto there, it kind of just eases the pressure on him a little bit. He doesn't have to come in like from the get-go and hit the ground running straight away. It can be the odd short, sharp burst. Where there's probably going to be more pressure is when they sign a right winger, because Everton don't have any on the books really. That right winger needs to be somebody who can properly be a difference maker, I'd suggest.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what he can do anyway, and how he goes about it, and certainly in those early weeks of the season. But you sort of alluded to needing the right winger there, and I think last week we spoke, we kind of said we expected the transfer business to really ramp up a bit, but it's kind of gone a little bit quiet, hasn't it, in regards to like major rumours, albeit it feels like we're on the brink of signing a backup goalkeeper in Travers. But he's been on Merseyside, I think, today as we record this on Monday, so I have his medical, so that one should be boxed off maybe by the time a lot of people listen to this on Tuesday. And otherwise, it's not been many serious links, has the Paddy? It's been like kind of suggestions, obviously suggestions about Douglas Luiz, suggestions about Kubo from Real Sociedad. But other than that, just I'm not sat here panicking by any means, because I think Moyes reiterated that they're going to do business. That announcement video for Thierno Barry with the blank sheet of paper for arrivals. With his one in the stamp from Leon in the top corner, with loads of space on the rest of the page, indicated there's going to be loads more business as well. But obviously Travers is quite close. And backup goalkeepers are not very sexy and exciting, but obviously it's something we need, because we've only got one in Jordan Pickford and obviously Tyra at the moment. But that's an important position filled, and everything else just kind of seems to be simmering along without advancing very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, without batting an eyelid, Everton have spent, provided Travers goes through, the best part of 45 million without recouping any money in terms of transfer fees. And if anything goes to show the difference the Freaking Group have made to the financial situation at the club, it's probably that. Fee of around £4 million initially, I'm told. So yeah, was on Merseyside for a medical on Monday. Should happen, all being well, as long as there are no complications. Probably announced Tuesday. Let's see how well this podcast ages with that in mind.
Kenny Tete scarred us all for the summer, I think.
Kenny Tete scarred everyone, I think, with his U-turn very late in the day. But this seems to make a lot of sense. And again, I don't think it's like the number one priority, but it was a position of need, given that they lost João Virginia and Asmir Begovic. I'm actually a little bit surprised somebody like Travers is keen to come to Everton, because he spent the second half of last season on loan at Middlesbrough and did very, very well by all accounts. And Bournemouth like him as well. So I think he probably sees himself as a starting quality goalkeeper. I think he's made 4 appearances for the Republic of Ireland, but none of them have been very recent. And while he's been in and about the squad, I think he'll what he will want and hope for is more minutes to get back to starting games, or at least being in that conversation. Has been interest from elsewhere in him, but it seems to tick an awful lot of boxes in the sense that he's 26 years of age, younger than Pickford, a different kind of profile to Pickford as well. If you look at his kind of physical stature, and again, a great, really, really good, reliable shot stopper, but maybe with some different skills as well in terms of how he goes about things. So again, because I don't watch a whole load of Bournemouth or Middlesbrough on weekends, certainly not when Everton are playing, I had to do a bit of an ask around in the game about Travers, and a lot of what came back was, really good, solid, reliable option there for Everton as a number 2. Not sexy in any way, shape or form. I completely get that. But like I say, it definitely was a position of need, and another one to tick off. So very, very soon, Everton could be up at around the £45-ish million mark by the middle of July, with the promise of more to come. What I would say on that passport and the announcement video is Carlos Alcaraz didn't make the cut on that, did he? But
no, he didn't actually, unless they're counting him as last season.
But that, the way that was framed in the press release when Alcaraz was signed, they said when his loan deal expires, and I believe his loan deal expired, the Flamenco one expired at the end of June. So effectively, you'd have been registered as an Everton player, if you follow that logic, in the next financial year, July the 1st. And he should have been on there as well. It's not quite as glitzy signing a loan player on a permanent deal as bringing in a new French under-21 striker from Spain, but it is still a signing. So maybe Alcaraz looked at that while he was in his shorts and flip-flops barbecuing away in North Liverpool, and wondering where he was on that passport.
It's kind of been forgotten about a bit, Alcaraz, hasn't he, amongst all this? Because there's been so much going on, and obviously finished the season great, but maybe that itself speaks to it. But I thought that announcement was great. I saw one person that went viral on Twitter complaining about we need to have more exciting announcements. I thought it all looked boss. So one of those. But in regards to other stuff, Paddy, it doesn't really feel like anything is imminent yet. We've got 2 weeks until they go to the States. It would be nice to get another couple more in for that, because that feels like the one, as much as these first 2 games against Accrington and Blackburn are important for different reasons, like that big trip where the whole team goes together, that feels like the one where you want the new signings in to kind of bed in and build the morale, and all those other things that happen off the pitch are really important.
Yeah, I mean, these first 2 games against Accrington and Blackburn are glorified fitness exercises to get minutes in the legs of those players. I don't think Moyes will want to overly burden them, because they'll have a pretty heavy load in training as it is. So this is just an extension of that, really. It will ramp up quite considerably in terms of everything once we get to the US. So you'll want as many through the door by then as possible to start that integration process and everything else. They've obviously, this week, so on Monday, they got back 3 internationals, didn't they? In Pickford, Idrissa Gueye and Iliman Ndiaye, all of whom had longer seasons because they were away with their national teams. That's good. Probably makes them less likely to play much of a role this week in those first 2 games, but they should be kind of well up to speed by the time of the US trip. It still looks a bit thin though, and we said this on last week's show, even when you include Barry and potentially Travers as well, and thin in a number of key areas, I would suggest. So you want those signings through the door as soon as possible. A lot happens behind the scenes that even we don't hear about, never mind fans. But from what I've heard, they are juggling an awful lot of plates and liaising with players and representatives and other clubs to see what's possible. And I think that's why you've had some of these names filter out, even though if I placed kind of different levels of stock on each of them. I mean, like you'll probably be able to tell from some of my reporting who I think is a bit more tangible as a target and who maybe isn't. So that stuff is going on all the time. It would be a surprise, really, wouldn't it? I mean, 2 weeks out from the US, if Barry and Travers were the only ones, I'd say that would be slightly disappointing, given how much Everton need to do. But let's see how it goes. One of the things that was mentioned to me earlier in the window is that sometimes you're actually waiting for targets and rival clubs to decide what they want to actually do. Where have they got the interest from? Where do they want to move to? Has the current club got an option in place to replace? I mean, so the example I'd use there is with Travers. That's the same time as Everton and Bournemouth are trying to do a deal for him. You've got Chelsea and Bournemouth trying to do a deal for Petrovic. And that's becomes a bit of a chain.
Yeah, and then obviously Chelsea are involved. Chelsea are playing out in this, states in the Club World Cup at the moment as well. So you've got that to factor in as well, which is like another thing in the mix.
Some players still away, some clubs late reporting back, all of this kind of stuff, and that's not to make excuses for any perceived lack of business. It's just the state of the market right now. The ones that made moves right at the start, as we said on previous shows, inevitably were ones like Liverpool and Manchester City, who had loads of spare cash down the side of the sofa and were able to do so. The kind of the top end of the market. What I find is that somebody like Barry had quite a bit of interest, but he had to look through his options, and he did eventually decide on Everton. I think that kind of sometimes comes into play, and clubs are sussing out what's possible. I still think, and this is an educated guess, but I still think at the end of August, start of September, we'll still be looking at Everton needing to do some form of business. Might not necessarily be loads, but some form of business. That's just the way the window works. Things, particularly loans, tend to hot up at the end, and then there becomes a bit of a domino effect when one player goes to a certain place and so on. So yeah, get as many in as possible before the US. Try to have your core squad ready, but probably expect some business after that as well. Almost certainly expect some business after that as well.
Yeah, and in terms of positions, you've alluded to desire and desperation to get right winger through the door. I think for me, it's probably, I think if I'd want two really in before that US, I'd want a winger and I'd want a central midfielder. They're the two I look at and think, as much as there's still a lot of holes in that squad, probably need to improve both fullback positions, really. I think we're kind of all right there for now. Like, Mikalenko is fine. Right back, you've got O'Brien there. Not ideal, but he did well last season. But
who goes left back if Mikalenko gets injured?
It's probably Branthwaite, isn't it? Or Patterson played there against Arsenal, didn't he? In that one game, did okay. But you probably look at McNeil.
McNeil maybe, but I mean he'd be more of a wing back, really, wouldn't he? So you might have to.
McNeil's your only current right winger, isn't he? Really? So then you'd have no right winger.
Yeah, and then you look at right back, and Coleman's running again, but he's not ready to play minutes, I don't think. So then you potentially taking Jake O'Brien from right back for a centre back role if Branthwaite goes to the left and so on. So it is patchwork. It is pretty threadbare right now. One of the things I did last week on The Athletic was kind of list the priorities, how many I felt Everton needed, and then rank them in terms of priorities. And yeah, nobody will be surprised I went for right wing right at the top of that.
But right wing 1 and 2 on the list.
Well, I mean, I fudged it a little bit because I think they need 2 wingers this summer, and I know that there's a feeling inside the club that they may need 2 as well. Certainly minimum 1. A starter and then somebody who can compete for minutes. Now, if they get the starter in, they could probably make do for the opening weeks of the season with the versatility of Njai and McNeil, and maybe even somebody like Patterson filling in off the bench on the wing. Not for much longer than that. But in some of these other positions, you look at it and just think they have to get others in. So if a cover style right winger came about late in the window, I wouldn't be particularly fussed. Ranking the areas of need was quite tough. Actually, once you get beyond the gaping holes, once you get beyond, say, right wing, because then you're thinking to yourself, is it more important that they get, in this hypothetical situation, is it more important they get somebody in for Mykolenko to help cover Mykolenko? Let's say he gets injured, or more important that they get cover for, let's say, Idrissa Gueye and James Garner, and that's quite tough. But I mean, like, central midfield still feels like, as we discussed on last week's show, that still feels really quite important this summer, doesn't it?
Yeah, for me, I think that after the winger, that's probably where I'd go next. Like, just because,
yeah,
like, Mykolenko's not got a great fitness record, as he's had a few little knocks down the years, but like largely, I think he's been all right in regards to, you know, I've not got the stats. Probably should look these up really, but I can't imagine he's played less than 30 games for us in many of the seasons. He's been a starter. Whereas Idrissa Gueye, as we mentioned, he is 36. He is going to be going away to AFCON for potentially 6-7 games midway through the season. Like that, I feel like that getting a midfielder in now who can sort of, you know, it's probably, let's be honest, the next midfielder we sign is going to have to play a lot over Christmas if it's going to be you know, in the pecking order with James Garner. Because it feels like Timo Bruno is probably a little bit below them in that list. So, again, it's obvious to say, but ideally, you want these lads in sooner rather than later so they can get fully assimilated to things. But just finally, Paddy, before we wrap up today, tonight, as people listen to this, Everton are playing against Accrington. You said there it's a bit of a threadbare squad, but it's always interesting in these first games just to see kind of what shape everybody's in, see, you know, how the squad is looking in that sense. A few young players that are around it as well that we might be able to get to see. You've got a chance to stake the claim. See Harrison Armstrong and having a little battle with Dwight McNeil and those one-on-one videos in training. And like of all of them, he feels like the one who's obviously closest to potentially doing enough to earn a place around the first team next year. And maybe of everyone kind of around the group at the moment is the one who you could say it's really important for him, because he feels like he could go with a good pre-season. He could really elevate himself into the reckoning for the first team squad. With an underwhelming one, he might just, you know, not relegate himself necessarily, but he could end up just being back on loan again in the Championship next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think he needs to have a good pre-season to convince Moyes. I mean, we all know that Moyes tends to be a bit cautious in terms of integration of youth. Maybe not quite as cautious sometimes as Dyche, but Armstrong will need to have a good pre-season, I think, to convince Moyes to pick him. But I do feel, because of the situation in central midfield right now, there is an opportunity here for somebody like Harrison Armstrong if he comes back and performs well early doors. Not only are they thin in central midfield, so in that deeper role, but beyond, with McNeil and Ndiaye needed elsewhere, beyond Alcaraz, you'd argue he's probably second in line for attacking midfield too. So I think he's got a great opportunity, and obviously did really well on loan at Derby. I mean, like, journalistically, we go into these early pre-season games looking for angles, don't we, and narratives. And like, if Thierno Barry had been playing this week, that would have been an easy hit for ourselves at the Athletic and you guys at the Echo. We're deprived of that because Tierno Barry shockingly has decided to go to Mykonos and have some do some training, have some gyros in the evening. But I don't begrudge him that. So I think that kind of the next one for me is like, who out of the young players gives Moyes something to think about in these games. Armstrong looks by far the most advanced and by far the most likely. I enjoyed seeing Braden Graham appear in some of those videos, because he's obviously one that's done really well in the youth ranks, even if he is a little bit younger and a bit more raw. So we'll see some of them, and we'll have to see some of them out of necessity. I mean, you've probably got Harry Tyrer in there as the starting goalkeeper against Accrington, given Pickford's only just back. You look at Armstrong, maybe somebody like Isaac Heath for one of the wing positions, given where they are right now. So there's an opportunity here for sure. And it's going to be interesting to see who grasps that chance and kind of who almost like convinces Moyes, right, he needs another loan or he needs to drop back down to the 21s. What we do know is that the squad situation is not going to change overnight. So there are opportunities. It's just who takes them.
Yeah, we'll be doing a instant reaction pod to that on the Blue Room as well. So if you want your fix or analysis from that Accrington game, that will be with you after full time tomorrow. Speaking of young players, Paddy, who were looking to make the cut at Everton on number 50 this week. There's one we spoke about before, Gethin Jones at 14-15, but the big man who wore number 50 for 3 seasons, can you believe it, is Ellis Sims.
Okay.
Actually scored a really important goal that I kind of think gets forgotten a bit at Chelsea away, when he made Barry look foolish. But other than that, like he kind of felt like one of those players that you hear about in the academy. He's like scoring 40 goals a season and hat tricks every other week, and it's like, what, this lad sounds absolutely incredible. But when he made that step up and when he kind of was asked to be a regular in the first team, you could just kind of see the difference in level. And maybe not necessarily in terms of finishing, because I think he's shown throughout his career he's a good finisher, but just that all-round technical ability, hold-up play, doing those sorts of things. I think he never quite cracked that side of it, did he?
No, I mean, anybody that's followed my reporting over the years will know that I do show a keen interest in the academy setup and follow players like Sims as they're coming through. And I'd often, after reporting on him scoring 3, 4, 5 goals for the under-18s, for example, I'd often get loads of people responding saying, get him in the first team. And like my very polite reply was mostly like, there's just such a difference. Like they're just like worlds apart. And that's probably the point I'd make about Braden Graham right now. Like it's such a step up, even from 18s to 21s football, never mind from 18s to the Premier League. And everything I heard about Sims at the time was like, he's an early developer, particularly physically. And while definitely a good goal scorer, they're having to work really, really hard on his all-around game to try and get him ready. And it's just like simple stuff like being able to play an active role out of possession, or knit the play a little bit with some of the hold-up play that they were trying to drum into him. And a big one is that kind of separation from, to use a coaching phrase, to get away from opposition defenders, that ability to make space in the box or outside the box and get your shot away. He always scored goals, but I don't think there was ever a sense within the club that he was nailed on to be a Premier League striker. And it was the same with Tom Cannon to an extent as well. I hope he goes on to have a really good career, and I think he will do, to be honest. I think he'll, at the very least, be a very capable, dependable Championship striker. And maybe if he hits his straps again for Coventry, maybe somebody takes a chance on him when they come up and they see how he does there. But I don't think it's a huge loss for Everton, and certainly not for the fee that they got for him. I mean, from trying to remember what my reporting was around this, but I think I had it up at around 8 million.
Yeah, that was the number I had in my head as well,
including bonuses, which is, it's not bad really for an academy graduate. Tom Cannon, relatively similar when you include Salon and everything else. So I wish him all the best, but I think we all need to be mindful when we see some of these lads, even in pre-season, that the gulf is just huge.
Yeah, Sims has scored 19 goals in 89 Championship games for Coventry. And when you think like they've been typically one of the strongest sides in that league, I think they probably would want a bit more for the money from him. But, obviously don't watch them loads in that sense. But yeah, it was weird when he coming through, because there was a lot of talk about his goals, but I don't think anyone really seemed to suggest like this lad's going to be amazing. Like the buzz you got with like some other young players that were coming through, maybe wanted to have a bit better careers. But
well, that's where I'd make a comparison with Harrison Armstrong, because I do feel as though like Harrison Armstrong statistically has not done anything at under 16s or under 18s level in particular that makes you really sit up and take notice, or makes let's say the average football fan sit up and take notice. but there was always a bit of buzz around him in a way that maybe wasn't with Ellis Sims. And I think I pay more attention to that actually than sometimes what you see on a spreadsheet or kind of a goal return or so on and so forth. So yeah, to go back to the point about Armstrong, really, really looking forward to seeing him in pre-season and hope he can stake a claim, because it would be lovely to have a homegrown Liverpool-born lad in the Everton midfield. Again, he plays, as I've said before, like a typical Scouse midfielder, all action, throws himself into tackles, but is really technical too. So I'm quite excited about his potential development.
Yeah, definitely. I really hope he does enough to stick around, like you said, because he does seem to have a little bit of everything about him in that regard. So, just a reminder to people who want to put a suggestion forward for the numbers section at the end of what we should do with it. Going to mix it up from next week. I'm not entirely sure yet what we're going to do, but we'll change something. So, This is your last chance to get your suggestions in. If you've got a great idea for us, it is evertonbyline@gmail.com, or you can leave and answer it in the comments. We've had loads of suggestions which have been pouring through, and there's a few really good ideas which I'm sure we'll take up one of them. But evertonbyline@gmail.com if you want to put your ideas forward. Just a reminder, we are sponsored by the Bridewell. You can see the logo there in the top right hand corner. If you are watching us on YouTube, do keep an eye out on their socials and on that, the Denby Castle and the Pen Factory over the summer with loads of great events going on. Leave us a comment, hit like, hit subscribe. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, you can leave a comment there too, as well as a rating, as the same goes on iTunes as well. That's it from me and Paddy. Thanks again for the support everyone has sent over the course of these 50 regular episodes and the couple of specials we've done as well. We'll be back again next week with actual football to talk about. Again, Everton want to play 2 football matches by the time we reconvene, Paddy. So that's very exciting as we build up to that US tour as well. And hopefully maybe with a couple more players through the door too. So plenty to talk about next week. Cheers for tuning in this week. Up the top, we'll speak to you soon.